I just ask you again, if anyone has just come in a second ago, if you can just mute yourself as soon as you come in, because we're expecting a lot of people on the call, so that would be really appreciated. I'm delighted to welcome you to this session, which is on the topic of domestic violence awareness. For those of you who may be logging in for the first time to our session, it's intended to provide beneficial information to our members and our representatives on work-related topics, and in some instances will complement our syllabus of programs which we offer to workplace reps to support them in the workplace and our activists. So these sessions are open to all members, and we ask you to let your colleagues know in your area that these sessions are ongoing and that there are some recordings from this year and last year on our YouTube channel for anyone who's missed it. And just to say to you as well, we're always looking for new topics of interest to you for the calendar. So if you have something that's either work or union related that you'd like to know a little bit more about, please let us know. Either drop something into the chat or send us an email to skillsacademy@forsa.ie. I'm sure you remember the email at this stage. We can look into that for putting it onto future sessions. And just to say, we do get a high volume of registrations, but we understand that people don't always get a chance to make it for the live session. So that's why we record them. And they are available just to our members on the Skills Academy YouTube channel. We send you the link to that. It's not a public channel. So we'll be sending that link out after the session closes, and it's been after the recording is available. So if you don't want to be seen on the recording, you can turn your camera off. And I know some people prefer to have their camera off because it is lunchtime. So I'm really, really thrilled to have join us today our guest speaker, Niamh Wilson, who is responsible for training and development with Women's Aid. And I think it's an organisation that a lot of us will be familiar with. This kind of comes on foot of a couple of motions to conference in the last couple of years, requesting us to provide information but training in the area of domestic violence, and also to look internally at our own organisation in terms of being an employer. So today is kind of the intro to that session. Today is to start us off with a baseline, to look at an overview of the work of Women's Aid, to provide some general awareness raising on the issue of domestic abuse, to look at how domestic violence and abuse intersects in the workplace, some principles for responding to a disclosure, and what resources are available. So it is very much an introductory piece, but I do hope that we'll have a lot of collaboration into the future between ourselves and Forsa and Women's Aid to be able to provide more information and training on this really important topic to our workplace reps, to make sure that they're aware in terms of their representative role, how they can support colleagues who may have made a disclosure to them, but also how to put this on the agenda to engage with their employer to ensure that the policies in those employments are adequate. So just in terms of how the session was going to run, Niamh is going to make her presentation, and I'd ask that you could send your questions into the chat so that at the end of the presentation I can gather those questions and put them directly to Niamh at the end. So it means that we're kind of speeding through the information and we can get through everything in the short time that we have, because we like to get people back to work at 5 to 2. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Niamh to deliver the session for us.
Thanks a million, Fiona, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this invite from Forsa to meet with you virtually and to provide some, basic information about domestic abuse and why domestic abuse is a workplace issue. And we'll also provide a little bit of information about what is there to support you as union reps when you go back to your employers, and if you want to try and initiate or lead out on some kind of workplace response to domestic abuse. So I'm going to start really though with really just talking about what domestic abuse is. And when I'm talking about that, I am going to be talking about issues that some people might find difficult to hear. Facing up to and confronting the issue of domestic abuse is not an easy thing to do by any manner of means. And so some of the content I might share, people might find somewhat upsetting. And certainly want to acknowledge that if people have any past history of trauma and have experienced any form of domestic or sexual violence, that, sitting in this session you might find tough. So please don't feel, just take time out if you need to, make sure you talk to a trusted person if you find the negative effects of being in this session, sitting with you afterwards. And also be aware that our helpline is there for you at every step of the way. Now, most of the people who call our helpline are survivors of domestic abuse, but we have many people calling as well who perhaps are worried about someone that's experiencing domestic abuse, or perhaps it's just some aspect of what they've heard may have brought up something for them, or they may just want more information about something. So the helpline is there for anyone who wants to call Women's Aid, get a bit of support and or just information in relation to domestic abuse for any reason. So it's 365 days a year, 24/7. It's free, it's confidential, and the number is in the slides, and then you will get a PDF of the slides. I'll forward them to Fiona and Roisin afterwards, and so they can be freely available to everyone. Of course, you know, the website is there, and all the information about what we do is on our website as well. So I'm going to start without any delay, and I am going to share my screen with you. So just give me 2 minutes to get that sorted. It disappeared on me for some reason. Now, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
That's good, Fiona. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
okay. Now, as you can see on the front of the title slide is not my name, it's Hannah Waite. And that's because Hannah is the project leader of the employer engagement project in Women's Aid. So it's a specific project we have to support employers to bring in workplace policies, supports, training and awareness. So I'll give you a little bit more detail about that at the end of the session, but it's Hannah that you'll be contacting in relation to this. Okay, so just that you know that. So I'm going to just start talking about what domestic abuse is. Sorry, I'll start with telling you a little bit about Women's Aid. Sorry about that. So I'm sure you do know who we are. A lot of people would have a good awareness of Women's Aid, and now we have a fairly high profile at national level. We're 50 years old next year, and really what we are working for is a zero tolerance, really working eventually towards the elimination of all forms of violence against women. But at the very least, a zero tolerance of domestic abuse and all forms of violence against women. We're a national feminist organisation and working to prevent and address the impact of domestic violence and abuse. So primarily what we do is provide direct services to survivors, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. But we also have very, very strong advocacy, policy, campaigning, training and education role as well. So we have many different kind of strands and arms of work in the organisation. And there's the free phone number that I told you about that is available to you, and that you may also want to pass on to anyone that you may feel concerned about, that you think that you either know is experiencing domestic abuse or even may suspect is experiencing domestic abuse. So looking at the whole issue of domestic abuse, it's well understood now that domestic abuse is one form of gender-based violence, one form of violence against women. And violence against women is understood as being the most widespread, persistent and devastating human violations in our world today, one of the most persistent and widespread. And it's very important that we do approach domestic abuse as a human rights issue for two primary reasons. First, that it helps us really connect to the core of what domestic violence abusers are about, which is that in order for them to have power and control, and that's what domestic abuse is about. It's about the abuser seeking to take and to maintain power and control in an intimate relationship. In order to do that, the abuser actually has to work to deny the victim or survivor basic human rights that you and I would take for granted on an everyday basis are denied to the victim survivor of domestic abuse. And secondly, the solutions to all forms of violence against women and domestic abuse really lie at a political level, at a societal level, at a community and neighbourhood level. This is not an individual problem. This is a problem that is societally created, and it is a problem only through solutions at that level are we going to see the change that we need. So it's very much important to kind of hold on to that perspective when we think of domestic abuse. I'm going to be focusing today on violence against women in particular, on women who experience domestic abuse at the hands of male intimate partners or ex-partners, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. One of the reasons is because of the prevalence of domestic abuse against women in Ireland, as it is in countries all over the world, is really, really high. So you can see from the last prevalence study done in Ireland that 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of abuse from a current or former partner. And so we understand domestic violence to be a gender-based crime because it affects women disproportionately. And not only does it affect women disproportionately, but women are targeted with violence and abuse by male partners because they are women. So it is a profoundly gendered crime. On a global level, between 85 to 95% of victims of domestic abuse will be women, and 85 to 95% of the abusers will be the men that they are or have been in relationships with. And the pattern of violence, abuse and control that's utilised by those abusers in order to gain power and control is profoundly gendered. So we can really understand this as a gendered crime. Now, I really want to say at this point that there are men who are victimised by both female and male partners, women who are in same-sex relationships who can also be victims of domestic abuse, people who identify as non-binary, trans people who can also be victims and survivors of domestic abuse. So we want to all, alongside holding this knowledge of it as a gendered crime, we also want to hold an awareness that, and it isn't just women who are subjected to domestic abuse by an intimate partner or ex-partner. So we always want to remain alert to that. And certainly from the session today and from any training that we would be delivering to your organisations or companies, if you choose to go down that road, certainly people, individuals and organisations can draw from that training. And if they're concerned about a man who's being abused, someone in a same-sex relationship, or someone, who identifies as non-binary or who's trans, and whatever the diverse gender identity or expression is, really the principles and practice guidelines of how you respond to somebody at risk of ongoing abuse applies across the board. So I just want to assure you of that. But I am focusing on women's experience because it is the predominant experience. It is the most likely the person that any of you are going to be responding to. And also there is a typology of violence. There are specific characteristics and features to domestic abuse as utilised, as perpetrated by men against female partners that is well documented, well evidenced and known. And so while some of the dynamics, across the board will be very similar, because all domestic abuse is about power and control. So there'll be lots of very similar dynamics. There will be some similar tactics. There are also some differences as well when it comes to how men abuse women and women abuse men. And so I'm going to be very much focusing on the typology of violence, of course, of control as implemented, as perpetrated by men against their female partners or ex-partners. So I've used the term coercive control, and we use the term coercive control interchangeably with domestic abuse, because really at the heart of domestic abuse is coercive control. And what we mean by coercive control is that it's an ongoing pattern of behaviour. So it's a persistent pattern of controlling, coercive and threatening behaviour, including all or some forms of domestic abuse, emotional, physical, economic and sexual, including threats by a current or former partner. It traps a woman in a relationship and makes it impossible or dangerous to leave. What we really need to be aware of, that coercive control in most cases will include the use of physical violence, but not in all cases. Okay, so the term domestic violence has actually diverted us to thinking of too much in terms of physical abuse. Physical violence. Physical violence will be present in most cases. Most abusers will assault their partners or ex-partners. But actually, when you talk to victims and survivors, they will be absolutely clear and have been telling us for years and years that physical violence is not the worst of what they are experiencing. It is not the most harmful form of abuse that they are being subjected to. And it is not the physical violence that is the primary thing that's entrapping them in a relationship with an abusive partner. So we really want to have a very clear awareness of what domestic abuse is, what coercive control is, and just have some knowledge of the tactics of abusers, the things they do, what they're about, what they're trying to achieve, and how it impacts on the victim survivor. And when we can look beyond physical violence, when we can look beyond, say, incidents, and really have this awareness of this as being a pattern of behavior, you know, we're in a much better position to actually recognize when someone that, you know, perhaps a colleague, friend, family member, is in a situation where they are being coercively controlled. Sorry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share a short animation with you. And in this animation, it highlights some of the key coercive control tactics, the key patterns of behavior used by perpetrators of domestic abuse. So it's just a small animation made in Northern Ireland, and I'll just provide a little bit more information about it when we finish. It's just a few minutes. Do let me know if you can hear it.
Coercive control. Where is the line? Not all domestic abuse is physical or verbal. Coercive control can be hard to spot. What may appear romantic and loving can cross a line and become damaging and harmful. But what is coercive control, and where is that line? Love bombing. A new relationship can feel fun and exciting. Having someone shower you with affection, admiration, and even gifts can feel fantastic. But sometimes it can be too intense. A bunch of flowers is nice, but 10 bunches, and a phone, and a holiday can be overwhelming if you feel you can't say no, or owe something in return. A call or text is nice, but constant messages can be intrusive. If you feel you're under pressure to reply quickly, or you don't have your own time and space, the line has been crossed. Compliments are nice, but compliments like, "You're the only person who gets me," "I only ever want to be with you," could be a warning if it makes you feel uncomfortable. A relationship should take time to grow. If you feel you're being rushed and things are happening too quickly, it may have crossed the line into love bombing. Isolation. A new partner can be a great addition to your support network, as well as friends and family, and having space outside a relationship for family and friends will only make things better. But a controlling partner will try to limit or cut off support of friends and family, telling you that other people in your life don't respect you or don't like you. They can also control your access to money, work, or education. If this is happening, the line has been crossed. Monitoring. It's nice when a partner takes an interest in your life, but if that interest becomes a constant presence in everything you do and everywhere you go, it's crossing the line. Listening to your calls, having access to your social media, photos and DMs, maybe even tracking your phone, are all signs of coercive control. Having your own privacy and boundaries is not the same as keeping secrets in a relationship. Gaslighting. A good relationship is built on trust. We all get things wrong sometimes, and it's okay to admit when you're wrong. But if you're always wrong and constantly doubting yourself, and you keep hearing things like, "I never said that," "You're so paranoid," "You're crazy," "You're making things up." If you keep questioning the evidence you've seen and heard, you could be experiencing gaslighting, and the line has been crossed. Coercive control is persistent and deliberate behaviour with the aim of gaining control over another. It's wrong and against the law.
Okay, so you saw from that video there that actually there was no mention of physical violence at all. Sure, there wasn't. It was all about non-physical forms of abuse. And these are the tactics, these are the strategies that women will tell us that actually have the worst impacts for them, that they cause the most harm for them. So if you think about it, what's common to all of those strategies is that the intention is to make the woman's world smaller. So the love bombing at the beginning, it's to overwhelm. It's to make sure that, the woman feels overwhelmed with love and affection, and that it kind of really diverts her from other things in her life. Okay, so already her world is becoming more focused on this relationship. Okay, this overwhelm, which, can be that lovely falling in love stage that many of us might have been through. But, if that is going to last for in the long term in her relationship, and when somebody has sinister intentions, which coercive controllers do, which is to control another person, that small world becomes a place where great harm is being done to that woman. Isolation, very clearly, about making her world smaller, cutting her off from all those key relationships that give her access to a bigger world and a really strong sense of herself in a very positive way. And monitoring, of course, is very much about making her world smaller. And what women will tell us is that what it makes them feel is that the abuser is omnipresent in their lives. So even if they're going out to work on an everyday basis, the fact that he's able to monitor them now through technology, and this is a huge issue now for women that we're working with, that technology is being used in really abusive ways. And to be honest with you, every new development I hear about new apps and new technology that can find your phones and whatever, my heart just sinks, because I know they're going to be used by abusers, and they are being all the time. And so for that woman, okay, she might be going out to work, but she's still being monitored. She still feels his presence in a very, very real way, even though he may not be actually in the workplace with her. And then, of course, the whole issue of gaslighting. Now, this is really critical to coercive control. This is absolutely central. Because gaslighting, as you probably know, is a course of conduct. A course of conduct behavior is the intention of which is to disconnect that woman from her own sense of reality. Okay. Now, there is no adult who is going to cede control of their lives to another adult willingly. None of you would do that. Would you hand over control to another adult willingly of everything about you? Would you stop being yourself and start being the person that the other person wants you to be willingly? No adult is going to do that. Gaslighting is critical to the abuser being able to take control of the other person's life, because it's about actually disconnecting someone from their own instinct about what is right and wrong, from their own sense of reality. It's about getting them to really doubt their own judgment, and over time to begin to internalize the internal world view of the abuser, so that he doesn't have to work so hard to control her, because she is complying more, she is doubting her own judgment more, she is accepting his justifications, and critically, she is blaming herself. Abusers work very hard to shift all the responsibility to the victim and survivor in order to be able to get away with what they're getting away with. So they're all the critical kind of strategies of abusers. There's many more, and you can knit in economic abuse and sexual and physical violence and, overt physical abuse into that. The thing about domestic abuse is abusers are not going to start off by being overt about their abuse, because if they do, what's going to happen? She's going to leave. He hasn't worked. He hasn't got to the point where she is really doubting her own sense of reality, where she really is disconnected from her instincts about what's right and wrong, where she hasn't got access to other people who are able to reflect back a different reality than his to her and remind her of who she was before she got into that relationship. Okay, so if you start off in a very overt manner, most women are going to walk out that door. Most people will walk out that door. So these tactics, as you can see, with the love bombing and with the isolation, that'll be very couched in early days in very positive terms, because I love you, because I want to be with you, because we're so special, it's you and me against the world. And the monitoring will be very, very covert, and the gaslighting is particularly covert and particularly sinister, because it really damages that woman's relationship with herself. And this is what women say to us are the two greatest injuries that they experience as a result of domestic abuse is a relationship to themselves, a safe relationship to themselves, where they trust themselves and trust their own instincts, and safe connection to others. So if you are in a situation where you're concerned about someone, if we only focus on, well, he's hitting her, why doesn't she leave? What we're missing is what's actually entrapping her, which is all of the things he has done to entrap her in that relationship over time through this ongoing pattern of coercive controlling behavior. So when we're thinking about working with somebody in, sorry, there's a bit of interference there, yeah. When we're thinking of, say, somebody in our workplace context that we're concerned about, to some degree, some, if not all of those tactics will have been used by their abuser, and to some degree, the intended impact of that will actually be experienced by the woman. That's going to be what's going on for her now. Alongside that, we absolutely need to recognise that women are not passive victims. They are active agents. They resist, they fight back, they strategise, they manage and cope. And so we want to hold those two knowledges together, because we really want to work from a strengths-based place rather than just from a deficit place as well. So it's really important that we acknowledge the resistance and strength and resilience of victims and survivors as well. So I'm just going to share again, just give me a minute there. Okay. So I've talked about just, the impact's been about making the woman's world smaller, damaging her relationship to self and others. And, what women will tell us, these are the key impacts of coercive control. So losing freedom and autonomy, living in fear, walking on eggshells, becoming isolated, impoverishment. This is a huge issue for women. And the research shows that practically in every single case where a woman separates from an abuser, that they end up suffering very much financially. And if a woman is already on a low income, often that they end up in impoverishment. This is why supporting women to stay in work is so, so important. 1 in 10 women who experience domestic abuse will end up losing their job directly because of domestic abuse. And this is where employers, colleagues, managers, HR people can really make very critical interventions to help to avoid that terrible outcome for women. Homelessness. Domestic abuse is the second most common reason for homelessness in Ireland. A variety of physical and sexual health impacts and mental health impacts. And so to think about that, the workplace context, perhaps you have a colleague who's absent a lot, who seems to be getting sick a lot, seems to have maybe physical illnesses that don't seem to have a very clear physiological underpinning. What is going on there? We know that victims of domestic abuse are many times more likely to be presenting to primary healthcare services because the physical, sexual, and mental health impacts are so severe. Injuries, of course, and then ultimately, unfortunately, death. So, we have experienced that in Ireland, as in other countries, women being violently killed by partners or ex-partners. And actually, over half of the women who are killed violently are killed after they have left their partner. Okay, in England, it's over 70% of women killed violently are killed in the first year to 18 months after they left their partner. So when we're talking about responding to victims and survivors of domestic abuse, we're not just talking about the response when they're in the relationship, we're talking about post-separation. And often this is when the violence and abuse will escalate. And this is often when you actually might become aware of it. Because it might actually be getting worse for the woman rather than better at this point. Okay. Why is domestic abuse a workplace issue? Well, I think trade unions, more than most employers, would have been very aware of that for many years, and there have been previous initiatives on domestic abuse. I've worked with women for a long, long time, and I think quite a lot of employers are aware of it. And certainly a lot of women will tell me that actually it was actually the support from their employers that was a critical piece of the jigsaw that helped them actually move forward. So we know that it is a workplace issue because it comes into the workplace. You know, it can't but come into the workplace. And so having awareness of how it comes into the workplace is really helpful. So we think of someone like Amelia. So you can imagine Amelia is a colleague of yours. She's worked with you for a number of years. She's a really reliable person, always on time, you know, is, you know, really engaged with colleagues, has been engaged with colleagues, has a public interface role and engaged there well. So, but recently in the last couple of years, you've noticed a change with Amelia. So she's less engaged with her colleagues. Her engagement with the public is, you know, she's less active in maintaining that. And also Amelia has been coming to work late on an ongoing basis. She had an informal warning from her manager, but unfortunately that didn't change. And now there is now the first stage of a disciplinary procedure in place for Amelia, verbal warning. So there's an issue here that has to be addressed, unfortunately. And Amelia is at risk here in terms of her job security. If we look behind closed doors and see what's going on, Amelia's been in a relationship with her partner for 10 years. They separated a year ago. And in that time, just coming up to that separation and the year after that, his abuse and violence and threats have escalated. So, you know, he became quite violent at the point of leaving. And after she has left, he bombards her with texts. He bombards her with pleas to come back to him, and then switches into threats. If you don't come back, you'll be sorry. You know what happened. You know, it's the or else that's hanging over her. In addition, you know, he often waits outside the workplace when she's going home. So she feels, you know, quite afraid coming to and from work. It's one place he knows where and when she's going to be. And they have a child and they share custody, and he, in part of the agreement is that he will pick the child up a couple of times a week and bring the child to school, and sometimes he just doesn't turn up, and then that leaves Amelia scrambling to get her child ready, get her child to school, and then she ends up being late for work. So you can see, you know, that this is really coming into the workplace. You know, it's causing the lateness, it's causing stress, it's causing distraction. She's checking her phone all the time, and she's feeling fear coming to and from work. So all of this is impacting on Amelia, obviously as a person, but as an employee and a colleague as well. Amelia is not unusual. 1 in 3 women in the EU has said that working women have experienced at least one form of domestic violence during their working life. So in any organisation, particularly big organisations, there will be a cohort of women who are currently being subjected to coercive control, even if the relationship is over, that the abuser continues with his pattern of behaviour. He might change some of his tactics, but the intention is the same: to coercively control, to pressurise, coerce, force their way back into the relationship. Now, it's sometimes post-separation, when he realises that's not going to happen, the project will change, and the project will change to making her life a misery. And I've heard women say that to me many, many times. He has told me he will destroy me, he will make my life a misery, I will never get to move on, I will never be free of him, even though we know she's not going to take him back. So we need to be really aware that we're not just talking about pre-separation situations here, and this can go on for many years afterwards. But the good news is that there is absolutely many stories of women, you know, moving forwards and being able to maximize their safety, being able to regain control of their lives, you know, being able to move through recovery and moving beyond recovery to thriving again. And many of them will have experienced support from the workplace. And the workplace is a critical point of support for many women, as I've said. It's not only a place where they can get information, it's not only a place where they can experience support and solidarity and referral to, you know, expert support. But what women also tell me is actually going to work for them was really important for them in helping them maintain a sense of self, a sense of self-efficacy, a sense of self-agency, connections to others. And so what it really did was it helped undermine what the abuser was trying to do to them, which was to control them. It helped women actually, you know, to do as much as they could to try and stay in control of their lives, to have something else that wasn't about him, have access to obviously finances being critical as well. But on that sort of psychological and emotional level, it was really, really important for women as well. So support in the workplace is really, really important, and continuing participation in the workplace is also very important for victims, survivors of domestic abuse. So what we're doing with this employer engagement project is really wanting to reach out to employers, say, look, you're probably doing some of this already, you know, and I know years ago, before there was anything like an employer engagement project or this new legislation, which is now bringing 5 days statutory leave for every employee and domestic violence leave. You know, I know employers were already responding to this, but I also worked with women where they weren't, where women didn't feel safe to say it was happening to them, or where if they did say it was happening to them, they became problematized. And if the impacts of the abuse meant that they were missing a day off work, or if the abuser was actually sabotaging their access to work, or if they needed to go to court, for example, and had to take time out of work, that, you know, this was not supported. This was not understood. It was not supported. And, you know, it's those factors that lead to women losing their job, to not progressing in their job. So there is so much that employers can do when they are aware, when they have a policy, when they have supports, and when there's training in place. And what the training is doing is firstly supporting people to spot the signs of domestic abuse. So rather than just look for signs of the physical assault and the injury, you know, that you're aware of, you're open to the possibility that that colleague or that person that you supervise or whatever, and you're open to the awareness that the reason they're missing work might be because of domestic abuse. Now, it's usually accumulation of things you'll see. You might see a change in behaviour. You might see that they're not coming to work very, very often, not coming to work maybe on time, or perhaps they were someone who socialized after work, went to work events, but now they're always rushing home for no particular reason. You're not sure why that's happening. So it might be 2 or 3 things that accumulate, and your instinct is something's not right here. So having an awareness of those signs really helps us stay open to the possibility that the things we're concerned about could be rooted in somebody being abused. And so things like work attendance, productivity and participation, things like that. Social behaviour, like how do they seem? Has their demeanour changed? Are they engaging as much with people as they used to? Do you notice that they seem to be very like agitated or jumpy, or do they seem very switched off or disconnected? And you're thinking, this isn't their usual self. What's going on here? There's all sorts of things there. And then escalating signs of abuse. This is somebody where you might notice perhaps maybe, you know, anxiety is getting worse and worse and worse. You know, you're noticing they're anxious. It seems to be increasing, and they seem nervous. That again, that kind of hypervigilance. And perhaps there's some behaviours that perhaps you have some contact with the abuser, or the abuser is beginning to actually intrude upon the woman's workplace. Now this is most likely at the point at which the woman seeks to separate or has just separated from her partner. Okay, so if he thinks he's losing her, or he thinks he's lost her, this is where we talk about that project changing. You know, up to this, he is presenting himself usually as hail fellow well met. Usually he's not someone who it's obvious he's an abuser, but sometimes the mask will slip, or he feels he doesn't have much left to lose. He doesn't care who knows. Okay. And so I've worked with women where their partner or ex-partner has come into the workplace in order to humiliate them, shouting in the lobby, where is she? Where is that B? Where is that C? Tell her I need to see her now. You know, really humiliating her, turning up at workplace events, you know, every time she goes out with colleagues, he arrives. You know, and you're noticing actually, you know, she seemed quite scared. This wasn't happening before. She seemed quite scared. And certainly the whole issue of stalking. So 71% of stalking in Ireland happens within the context of post-separation domestic abuse. Most of it, okay? And there is post-separation stalking that there may not have been a pattern, of course, of control before, but in most cases there was. Okay, so things like that, besetting her outside the work, following her to and from work, all of that kind of thing, or just constant, you know, you notice that the texts, the phone calls, the emails, she's just constantly, this is increasing. You know, you noticed it was a bit before, and now she is just constantly distracted. You know, so she has to respond within a minute or 2 minutes, or else she's in trouble. So there's all these kind of things you want to look out for. They're all impacting on her in many, many ways, profoundly harmful ways, and they're impacting on her participation and presence and being in the workplace. So spotting the signs is the first thing that we will be training around. And then we'll be training around then how do you respond to that? And it'll be very much, you know, about often people coming to the training, they'll be people who might be in a HR position, a people-facing position. They might be a manager, a supervisor, and so we'll be training around that. But also with that, there'll also be awareness sessions, so that like this, so everybody gets to just get, you know, just a few tips, a few kind of ideas about just how you respond to the victim and survivor. Now, you know, there's a much greater awareness now of being person-centered than there used to be. So a lot of people work in this way anyway, and respond this way anyway, but we'll certainly be providing information about when you recognize the absolute critical importance of listening. Okay, I think one of the reasons people often feel scared about domestic abuse or responding to domestic abuse, they feel that people think they're going to have to do something. Okay, they're going to have to call the guard, or they're going to have information about court orders. None of that is necessary. None of that is required. We would never call the guards unless the woman asked us to anyway. Okay, we would always leave choice and agency in her hands. You don't need to know anything about the ins and outs of the legal system. And mostly what the woman is looking for on all of the evaluations with survivors tell us this, they are looking for to be listened, to be heard, to be believed, and to be understood and not judged. And if a woman experiences that in an encounter with somebody, it is going to actually make a real difference to her, because he has told her, nobody will believe you. Everyone knows you're an F up. Everyone thinks you're an effing idiot. This is all about you. You know, and, you know, she's going to have real fears about being judged. We know that shame and embarrassment is one of the primary reasons women do not tell. So what we always want to do is actually just hold that space, that listening space, communicate that we are non-judgmental, and that's simple things like, you're not to blame. Okay, I understand why you might find it really difficult to do anything about your situation. And we also want to communicate belief, and that's really simple things like, I'm really sorry you're experiencing this. That sounds really difficult. Simple verbal responses. Validating her decision to disclose. Thank you for telling me this. This can't have been easy. But you know what? I'm really glad you told me that now, because now I get what's going on for you. And now maybe we can work together to see how we can support you with that here in the workplace. Okay. Emphasize confidentiality. There is absolutely no onus on anyone to share any information about adult survivors of domestic abuse unless there is information that children are at risk. And we would go into that in more detail in the training. Obviously, referring her on for support. There's a whole network of domestic violence services. I'm going to show you information about that now. And if you can offer relevant practical support in-house. And of course, the domestic violence leave now really is practical, but a number of companies now are bringing in domestic violence policies, which include how domestic violence leave is provided for within organisations. And they also look at other practical supports that they can offer. And every employer can offer some, you know, a suite of practical supports. And then the whole thing of always keeping the door open so that she feels that she can come back and talk about it if she needs to is really important. So you can see that there's an awful lot that can be done, and I can testify to the fact I've worked in this issue since 1987. I've worked with so many women, I don't know how many, that actually the main thing a woman will talk about when they actually interact with someone is they believe me. They listen to me, they believe me, and they didn't judge me. They're not saying, oh God, they gave me chapter and verse about court orders, or, you know, that's not what they're interested in. It's actually what they feel. What they feel is safe connection with someone who does that. And we know that the greatest antidote to coercive control is safe connection with herself, because remember, he's worked hard to injure and damage that, and safe connection with others, which he has done his best, not only to injure, but to actually fracture. And if she experiences that with you, just that listening response, that non-judgmental, that believing response, and a safe response, and that's very much around the confidentiality and making sure she remains in the driving seat. And you know, you are actually contributing to her journey to safety and to autonomy. That's all any of us can do, and that's all that is asked of people. Okay, so the employer engagement project, as I said, is there as a whole project. It's a whole, it's got 3 legs. It's a specialist training and policy service for employers, and the aim is to create a supportive, understanding and safe workplace environment for victims of domestic abuse. And the 3 legs are training, policy and awareness. So the Women's AIDS Training and Development Department will work with employers around all 3 of those levels. And we would be delighted if you are talking to your organisations or companies. We would be more than delighted to talk to whoever might be the key person in terms of kind of negotiating that with us. We'd be delighted to talk to them and just give them some more information about that. I'm going to share finally just a very quick video, which is just what the DV services are, just in case at this point in time you or anyone else might need that expert support, and you will have that. So just give me this, just take 3 minutes less.
Hello, my name's Sarah Benson and I'm the CEO with Women's Aid. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here to give you some practical information to help you support anyone subjected to domestic abuse. You'll probably already be aware of the Women's Aid National Free Phone Helpline on 1800 341 900, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The helpline provides a listening ear, understanding and support and information to women subjected to domestic abuse. It's a resource for those in an abusive relationship and also for friends, family, colleagues or professionals who are looking for support and information to help someone who is being abused by a current or former partner or spouse. The helpline has an interpretation service for anyone for whom English is not their first language. We can avail of over 200 different languages, and we make this facility available to other professionals who may be assisting a woman subjected to domestic violence. To access the interpretation service, you just call the helpline, tell us which service you're working with, and request the language you want. Women's Aid also offers an online instant messaging support service available on our websites, womensaid.ie and 2intoyou.ie. This is for those who prefer this form of communication, for those who are fearful of being overheard, and of course, for deaf and hard of hearing women. Please check the Women's Aid website for opening hours. In the Dublin area, we offer one-to-one advocacy and support services, including court accompaniment, and we have a dedicated drop-in service in partnership with Inchicore Outreach Domestic Violence Centre. This is based in Dolphin House Family Law Courts, Monday to Friday, and no appointment is necessary. This service offers information and support to women who are going through the daunting process of engaging with the court system. The helpline is a point of contact for all Women's Aid services and can signpost callers on to the full network of specialist domestic violence organisations around the country who provide support and information, advocacy services and court accompaniment, as well as emergency and supported accommodation in the form of refuges, safe houses and transitional housing. 3 websites provide contact details on all domestic violence services in Ireland: womensaid.ie, safeireland.ie and stillhere.ie, sponsored by the Department of Justice. Stillhere.ie also includes information on all sexual violence services and other helplines such as the Male Advice Line and the LGBT helpline. Always remember that if someone is at high risk or in immediate danger, you should never hesitate to call An Garda Síochána on 999 or 112. Thank you again for participating in this Women's Aid event.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. And these are just various different social media sites that you can stay in touch with Women's Aid about if you want to. And particularly if you are interested in finding out more about the Employer Engagement Project, or somebody in your company is or organisation is, just go into our website, go into Get Training, and then there's a page for employer supports. So all the information is there and the contact details and everything. So it's easy to access. Great.
Brilliant.
So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Niamh. That's fantastic. Really informative, very beneficial. I'll just have a look in the chat. There's a couple of questions and comments. I know someone has asked, just bear with me, someone asked a question around, is coercive control illegal in Ireland? So
It is, yes, it's criminal now, yes, since 2018. It is criminalised, that pattern of behaviour. So now if that pattern of behaviour can be evidenced in court, there will be a conviction. But I do want to kind of just advise that all of the convictions to date, there has been very high level of physical and sometimes sexual, but definitely physical violence. So the pattern of coercive controlling behaviour without physical violence, I don't think we've had a conviction on that yet, but it is being criminalised, and it is impacting on the ground in terms of understanding with Gardaí and courts and that this isn't just about physical violence. So it is having a positive impact, yeah.
Okay. I have another question just around, have medical staff and clinicians been trained in detecting if someone is being domestically abused? Is that part of their training? Do you know?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. We, for a start, we have trained over half of the midwives in Ireland to date. So, and we've an ongoing maternity project. So very much focused on that, because that is one setting in which women will be seeing health professionals on their own. And so every midwife will ask, every woman is screened at her booking and at a later stage. So we're training all of them, and we train many different professions. That's a very targeted strategic project, but we will also train anyone who comes to us looking for that. So we train doctors, all sorts, A&E, everything, yeah. Yeah,
sure. Just one or two more questions. In the world of working from home, somebody is indicating it probably is more difficult. Do you have any advice around signs that maybe with somebody who's not working in the office as often?
Yeah, that's a hard one. That is a hard one. I mean, the signs are going to be far less visible. I think, I don't know. I mean, if things like, just a woman obviously seeming anxious, not seeming herself, you're looking out for those more behavioural, maybe mental health impacts, or maybe somebody who's quite ill on an ongoing basis. And you just might want to start with very general questions. Is everything okay at home, and that kind of thing. I do know we've had a couple of women, for example, working from home, and the abuser will just turn off the internet and stuff like that, and maybe there isn't any good reason for why those kind of things are happening. They're hard. I think if you have a suspicion, I think really try and find a pretext for having a face-to-face one-to-one with that person and check it out, and it mightn't be that, it might be something else. But there's no way, if he is ever present, in the home and is around, and if you get a sense that he's there, you can't ask. You can't ask. It's just too unsafe. So if you can find some pretext to see her, or if you're absolutely confident that she's in a space where he isn't around, where you can approach gently with her. And that's where the training is very much about that ask, very much about how you ask. So we really focus on that in the training.
Sure. There's just a comment for, I think it's more for us really. The headline is, the seminar is domestic violence awareness, but what about the men? I mean, you have indicated that some of the signs and would be similar across, you know, whether
Absolutely.
it's male to female or vice versa. But obviously the referral, there are different organisations that look at violence against women. We can look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Men's Development Network run the National Helpline for Men, and so I would suggest a connection with them as well. Is really useful as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we might look into that into the future. Somebody has just mentioned, I think it's more of a comment. Sorry, now there's a lot of comments in the chat. There's been like back and forth to people. There has been, somebody has indicated there is a successful prosecution in relation to coercive control. There's only been one. So
no, there's quite
I
a
don't
few.
have any.
There's quite a few. Okay. No, now it's not enough.
Right.
Alaska, it's in the 20s, maybe 30s now. But the issue is that now, unless you're talking about a prosecution for coercive control where there was no physical violence, and that may have happened, I mightn't be aware of that. The last I had looked, basically every single case had accompanying quite serious levels of physical violence. So maybe there has been one since then that is just prosecuted on the non-physical forms of abuse. I might be wrong about that. Yeah.
Okay.
We've had a few.
Yeah, if our contributor wants to put more information into the chat, I can pass that on to you. There's just one final question that somebody has, and it's: are there any additional changes to legislation that you would like to see take place?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we have a very good draft of legislation in Ireland, actually. It's one thing we do have. We've had recent ones. We've got Coco's Law, which is about, online, sharing intimate images, or even threatening to share intimate images, unwanted communications. We've got new stalking legislation. All of the domestic violence orders have been extended beyond, having to have lived with the person. You only ever have had to have been in an intimate relationship with them. So there's not a huge amount that we're lobbying for now. What we're looking for is consistent implementation, and we're looking for a much greater level of training and education of judges, of guards, of everybody in the legal in the criminal, civil and criminal justice sector, because they're not being resourced to implement the legislation consistently. When there are pockets of really good practice, and when it is implemented well, it makes a huge difference to victims and survivors, and acts as a preventative measure as well. But we're just not seeing that consistency yet.
Okay, and I think there's just one final question. Just somebody's asking, can you equate coercive control with bullying?
Well, I mean, you can describe it as bullying, but you've got to think about the intent of the bully and the coercive controller. So say, bullying in a friendship group or bullying in a workplace, which is absolutely unacceptable and has real impacts on people, really harmful behavior. But is the intent to take over complete control of that person's life and shape them into the person that you want them to be for you? No, that's not the intent. The intent is to put them down. You know what the intent is. So yes, there's lots of similar features, but it's the intent is the issue, is what we really need to understand. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And our final question, because we're bumping up to 2:00. Do you know how long it will take before the supposed overhaul of family law will come into effect?
Oh gosh, I wish it's been on the cards for so long. Yeah. I'm probably not up to speed with that, to be honest with you. I'm sure our CEO and people in policy in the organisation will have their finger on the pulse in that one, but it's been taking quite a while. But I don't know. I couldn't say I know the ins and outs of that at the moment.
But potentially room for campaigning on it at some point in the
absolutely
coming up with general election or whatever.
There's just so much in it that needs to change, and there has been a commitment to that change. But as you know, commitments mean nothing unless they're implemented. So. Yeah,
we're well familiar with agreements and commitments. It just leaves up to me now just to probably communicate to you, Niamh, all of the fabulous kind of comments and thank yous and excellent presentations that we've had in the chat section. People have been really happy with the presentation, as have we. I mean, it's really informative. It's very clear. There's a great understanding from what you've done. You've made it quite a complex issue, quite, you know, easy to handle, because I think the thing you mentioned was people are nervous about, you know, talking to somebody about it because they're not sure what to do. They're not sure what's expected of them. So you've made that quite clear. And I look forward to working with yourself and Women's Aid into the future to look at our training needs for our representatives and what they may need, and potentially to put some of our larger branches in contact with Women's Aid, just to see if there's something that we can do around training, and then any other organisations linked to violence against men. We might kind of do that into the future. So
Brilliant.
just to say thanks for everyone's attention and your attendance, and enjoy the long weekend.
Great. Thanks a million, Fiona. Thanks
very
Roisin.
much,
Bye,
Kate.
everyone. Have a good
Take
weekend.
care, everyone.
Bye-bye.